Imagine a narrow, 33-kilometer-wide corridor of water so strategically vital that its closure could trigger a global economic depression within months. This is the Strait of Hormuz, a slim waterway linking the Persian Gulf to the open ocean, and it is the world's most important energy artery. Approximately 1/5 of all oil consumed on the planet, over 20 million barrels every single day, must pass through this geopolitical choke point. But this is not just a story of modern energy politics. For centuries, before a single drop of oil was ever drilled, this strait was a legendary gateway for trade, a coveted prize for empires, and a symbol of unimaginable wealth. Today, as tensions between Iran, the United States, and Israel threaten to boil over, the world holds its breath, watching this narrow stretch of water. The history of the Strait of Hormuz is a tale of ancient kingdoms, colonial conquest, and the relentless modern quest for energy. It binds every economy on Earth to its volatile shores. The Strait of Hormuz derives its name from the ancient kingdom of Hormuz, a powerful medieval empire that dominated these waters from the 11th to the 15th centuries. Situated on an island in the strait, the Kingdom of Hormuz controlled all maritime routes in and out of the Persian Gulf. They amassed vast wealth by taxing the spice, silk, and jewel-laden ships that passed between east and west. The strait itself is a narrow passage, lying between Iran to the north and Oman and the UAE to the south. At its narrowest point, it is just 33 kilometers wide. The shipping lanes for inbound and outbound traffic are only 3 kilometers wide in each direction. For large oil tankers, it is like navigating a 2-lane highway through treacherous reefs and shallow waters. This geography is what makes it so strategically potent. Whoever controls the narrow shipping lanes effectively holds the key to the Gulf's wealth, a fact understood by ancient rulers and modern navies alike. European powers were quick to recognize the strategic value of this choke point. In 1507, the Portuguese admiral Afonso de Albuquerque led a fleet to conquer the Kingdom of Hormuz. He famously called the island a cork stopper choking the throat of Islam. By 1515, the Portuguese had captured Hormuz, building a fortress to monopolize the spice trade and block Muslim shipping from reaching India. Their strategy was to control all major entry points into the Indian Ocean, and the Strait of Hormuz was their most critical prize. This control lasted for over a century, until 1622. A combined force of the English and Persians finally captured Hormuz, ending Portuguese dominance. This early colonial struggle foreshadowed the geopolitical battles to come. For the next several hundred years, the strait remained a vital artery for trade. However, its global importance would explode with a single discovery in the early 20th century: oil. The discovery of vast crude oil reserves in the Persian Gulf transformed the Strait of Hormuz. It evolved from a historic trade route into the strategic center of the global economy. Suddenly, the strait became the only outlet for the oil that would power the world's industrial machines. This new reality became violently apparent during the Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s, in a conflict that became known as the Tanker War. Both Iran and Iraq began attacking neutral oil tankers in the strait to disrupt each other's economies and draw in outside powers. Kuwaiti tankers carrying Iraqi oil were particularly vulnerable, prompting a massive American naval intervention. The U.S. Fifth Fleet, based in nearby Bahrain, began escorting reflagged tankers through the dangerous waters. This became the largest naval surface warfare operation since World War II. The tanker war established a dangerous precedent. The Strait of Hormuz was not just a passive shipping lane, but an active military flashpoint where local conflicts could threaten the global oil supply. The legal status of the strait adds another layer of complexity to its volatility. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, designates it as an international strait, granting ships and aircraft the right of transit passage. However, Iran and Oman, which control the territorial waters, claim a 12-mile territorial sea. They argue that ships are only entitled to the more restrictive innocent passage. The United States, which is not a party to UNCLOS, insists on the right of transit passage as a matter of customary international law. This fundamental disagreement is a constant source of tension. Iran has repeatedly threatened to close the strait, viewing it as its most powerful strategic pressure point. While it has never fully closed it, Iran has used mines, seized vessels, and harassed shipping to exert pressure. In 2024 alone, Iran seized several vessels near the strait, often in retaliation for U.S. seizures of Iranian oil tankers. This cat-and-mouse game keeps global energy markets in a state of perpetual anxiety. The stakes are quantified in the massive volume of energy that transits the strait daily. In 2024, an average of 20 million barrels of crude oil, condensate, and refined fuels passed through the Strait of Hormuz. This accounts for about 1/5 of global petroleum consumption. This represents nearly $600 billion worth of energy trade per year. Beyond oil, the strait is also critical for natural gas. Qatar, one of the world's largest LNG exporters, sends virtually its entire supply through these waters. Furthermore, a staggering 1/3 of the world's seaborne fertilizer trade, about 16 million tons, also transits the strait. The UN warns that disruptions could devastate agriculture in the world's poorest countries. The numbers paint a clear picture. The Strait of Hormuz is not just an oil choke point. It is a choke point for global food security and economic stability. The recent conflict, escalating since February 2026, has brought these risks into sharp focus. Following U.S. and Israeli attacks, Iran effectively blockaded the strait, vowing to keep it closed as leverage. Traffic, which once saw over 150 vessels daily, plummeted to just a handful of ships. The impact on global oil prices was immediate and severe, with Brent crude spiking toward $120 per barrel. The disruption has highlighted a major shift in global energy flows. Unlike the 1973 oil embargo, when Western countries were the primary buyers, today approximately 84% of the crude oil and condensate moving through the strait is destined for Asian markets. China, India, Japan, and South Korea are now the most vulnerable. China alone imports an estimated 90% of its Iranian oil. This creates what analysts call India's Hormuz dilemma, a strategic vulnerability. It forces major Asian powers to take an active interest in the security of a waterway thousands of miles from their shores. The threat of closure has prompted Gulf nations to develop alternative routes. Saudi Arabia operates a 1,200-kilometer pipeline capable of transporting up to 5 million barrels per day to its Red Sea port of Yanbu. The UAE has built the Habshan-Fujairah pipeline, which can move 1.5 million barrels per day to a port on the Gulf of Oman, bypassing the strait entirely. However, analysts warn these are only temporary relief valves. The combined unused capacity of these pipelines can only offset about 2.6 million barrels per day. This is a fraction of the 20 million that normally flow through the strait. Furthermore, the Red Sea itself is now a high-risk zone, with Houthi rebels in Yemen capable of attacking ships and infrastructure. The harsh reality is that there is no viable, large-scale alternative to the Strait of Hormuz for the world's energy supply. The Strait of Hormuz remains the most critical and most vulnerable point in the global energy network. Experts warn that a prolonged blockade, lasting between 1 and 3 months, could reduce global economic growth by 2.5 to 5 percentage points. If it extends beyond the 90-day strategic oil reserve capacity of the International Energy Agency, the world could face an economic catastrophe on the scale of the Great Depression. The International Energy Agency has already described the current disruption as the largest oil supply shock in history. Global supply could potentially fall by 8 million barrels per day. As the conflict between Iran, the U.S., and Israel continues, the world watches this narrow waterway with bated breath. The history of the Strait of Hormuz, from ancient kingdoms to modern superpowers, has led to this moment. This is a stark reminder that a 33-kilometer stretch of water, thousands of miles from most major economies, still holds the power to shape the future of the entire planet.